have a long story, and you know, this is all journaling reasons and purposes. So, you know, I just throw it out there. When my wife of 22 years told me she wanted a divorce, which came out of the blue, I was as shocked as I've ever been in my entire 60 years of life. I was just shocked. I had no clue it was coming. Totally pulled the rug out from under me. And it turns out she was involved in, you know, some cyber stuff probably 6 months prior to her finally fessing up to the fact to herself and then to me. And for that 6 months, she looked at me in a different way. And that 6 months, she came to look at me as an antagonist, you know, wanting to get out of the marriage rather than make the marriage work. So finally, when she did admit it to herself, it was all about just getting out. You know, it wasn't about working it out. So there was no opportunity for me, even though I offered a zillion times, you know, to let me try to help fix or whatever, but it didn't make any difference. So, you know, so I stayed in the house about 3 weeks, and we worked some stuff out as to what we would do, and, you know, sorted through all our stuff, and, you know, the first decision whether or not she was going to stay or go. And I'm old school, I'm an old guy, and so it just doesn't, you know, that doesn't work that way. She has the nest. It doesn't matter if she went out on me or I went out on her, it's her nest. So, you know, along with that, there's a lot of stuff that I could not, being mobile, see myself take. So I decided just to go light. Now, I knew God many years ago and served Him as an itinerant preacher, but mostly as a homegrown deacon and elder in different fellowships. And I sinned mightily against God and man, and lost that ordination or that license. Well, I didn't lose it, I gave it back. And, you know, so for 20 some years, yes, right after a year or so, two after I met my wife, I resented the church. I thought, well, you know, I would never do that, so how could the church do that to me? And so I didn't want anything to do with the church. I still love God, but I just didn't care much for His bride. That's the way I kind of looked at it. So, you know, being such, though, that way, I really didn't live for God. I wasn't committed to Him. I still was blessed with wisdom, and I still, you know, believed in the truth of His Word, but I did not serve His Son, and therefore did not serve Him. Okay, so when I was preparing, as soon as this news was dropped on me, you know, my heart went to God, because He has never left me. He has never forsaken me, and He has always been there. So that's who I ran to. And it's funny how we always turn to God, or many times turn to God when we're so far down. But you know why? That's because that's when we're poor. That's when we're rich, we see no reason or need for God. We, you know, are living life at our own discretion. And when we're poor, we're willing to pay whatever cost is necessary to feel love again, to feel life again. So that's when I felt myself really inside turning to trust God again. And so during this 3 weeks, He kind of set up for me a plan. And I look back in retrospect, and it was God. You know, He set up this plan for me to go woofing. You know, my son Joe had went off to Hawaii, and just got bored with life, took a one-way ticket to Hawaii, and he's been there for now over a year, just being a bum, and apparently loving it, off-grid. So I thought, well, there has to be something like that in America, and so I started looking on the net, and sure enough, there was this woofing thing, you know, and it's a worldwide organization of organic gardening, and you travel around, you know, and they connect you with people, homeowners and whatnot, that want some help in their garden or with their ranch or whatever. And so I looked there and I joined. It was $40 for a year. And I looked at a couple of places, and two places really stood out to me. They were close, and that was something I wanted. I wanted to be close. So if something were to happen or my wife were to change her mind, I'd be able to come back soon. And I also wanted to travel back and forth. So I went to one place in South Carolina and one place in North Carolina. Now, it was really interesting the way these two places were lit up on the screen and how they worked out. One place, the first place I went to, was a woman who was she was still doing hospice care, but she was a nurse. And, she really, really, really helped me during the 3 weeks to a month that I was there get my body somewhat back in shape. I came to terms there with the fact that I was still diabetic and I had not been checking my numbers and stuff. So I got back to that, and she was my own age, and she was forceful, but she was caring. She was not a Christian. That was very humbling, but very, very insightful, and was like leg one. Leg two was a ministry, and I knew it was a ministry when I went there. It was in York, South Carolina. And I had talked to the minister, and I filled out like a questionnaire, and he said, well, let's see if my wife, is in agreement that you should come. And it was all kind of vague and stuff. But anyway, it all got worked out. And so I went there. It was there another 3 weeks to a month. And, it was just really a wonderful experience. As soon as I walked in to his name was Jeff. As soon as I walked into Jeff's house, they were in prayer and or meeting for prayer, and I recommitted my life to Christ. It was just a given. As soon as I walked in, it was just, I recommitted. And, I had been praying up to this point, but up to that point I had not really felt like I was part of the body of Christ again until I walked in that door. And so what a monumental mile marker for me it was. And so then that began 3 weeks to a month of intense fellowship and work. And really, it was a little almost too much work for me. It was dead summer, and I was taking care of the chickens and doing some other stuff. And it was, even though there was some breaks in between, Jeff is a bit of a taskmaster, and it was morning till, dawn till dusk kind of stuff almost, because I was taking care of the chickens. And come dusk, I was tired. I was ready to go to sleep. But, it was like family. So I really, really am always indebted. I will always be indebted to them. But anyway, so after that, I felt like God had it in a plan that he had spoken to me when I first left. When I first left the house, I went camping for 8 days. And I think I actually made 7. And I think I left a day early. But I went to a place and just camped and cried and wept and pleaded with God and prayed. And during that time, God told me that he would keep me safe and, not to do anything foolish, just to use common sense. And I would find my way back and go back where I belong. Well, I took that to mean 2 things. One, that I would come back to the church, which I did. And 2, that I would come back to Greenville, which I did. So now, where am I? Well, now I have been in a place of living with my friend Adam and suffering through many of his woes, and at the same time suffering through mine. Kind of transition, reestablishing myself. I have not found a church yet, and I've almost given up because I've just went to so many. Can't find a place that just feels like it's the right soil for my roots and or to be committed to. Not even sure if I can be committed, but I have gotten a job. I came back, and that was miraculous in itself. I started putting out applications, and in the second day I had someone called me for an interview, and sure enough, it was as if I was hired when I walked in the door, because they just hired me. So I went back into hotels, which is what I was a chief engineer for 25 years at several hotels. Well, I did not go back in as a chief. I went back as an Indian. and it has really helped me be a servant, and it has not had the responsibility, so it's freed me up to continue, laying myself before God and finding out His direction. So that is the past in a nutshell. And I know this was a big nutshell, but I felt it necessary to go ahead and kind of document it just for my own sake, if nothing else. So thanks for listening. I got to get a few minutes of prayer in here before I get to work.